These are supposed to be silver linings? He suggests that those radical changes be extended. Quote, the Great Reset agenda would have three main components. The first would steer the market toward fairer outcomes. To this end, governments should improve coordination and create the conditions for a stakeholder economy. It would include changes to wealth taxes, the withdrawal of fossil fuel subsidies, and new rules governing intellectual property, trade, and competition. The second component of the Great Reset agenda would ensure that, quote, investments advance shared goals such as equality and sustainability, unquote. Here, the WEF head states that the recent huge economic stimulus budgets from the EU, USA, China, and elsewhere be used to create a new economy, quote, more resilient, equitable, and sustainable in the long run. This means, for example, building green urban infrastructure and creating incentives for industries to improve their track record on environmental, social, and governance metrics. Finally, the third leg of this Great Reset will be implementing one of Schwab's pet projects, the Fourth Industrial Revolution. The third and final priority of a Great Reset agenda is to harness the innovations of the Fourth Industrial Revolution to support the public good, especially by addressing health and social challenges during the current health crisis. Companies, universities, and others have joined forces to develop diagnostics, therapeutics, and possible vaccines. Establish testing centers, create mechanisms for tracing infections, and deliver telemedicine. Imagine what could be possible if similar concerted efforts were made in every sector. The Fourth Industrial Revolution includes gene editing biotech, 5G telecommunications, artificial intelligence, and the like. UN Agenda 2030 and the Great Reset. If we compare the details of the 2015 UN Agenda 2030 with the WEF Great Reset, we find both dovetail very neatly. The theme of Agenda 2030 is a sustainable world, which is defined as one with income equality, gender equality, vaccines for all under the WHO, and the Coalition for Epidemic Preparedness Innovations, CEPI, which was launched in 2017 by the WEF, along with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. In 2015, the UN issued a document, quote, Transforming Our World, the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, unquote. The Obama administration never submitted it to the Senate for ratification, knowing it would fail. Yet, it is being advanced globally. It includes 17 Sustainable Development Goals, extending an earlier Agenda 21. The 17 include to end poverty and hunger in all their forms and dimensions, to protect the planet from degradation, including through sustainable consumption and production, sustainably managing its natural resources, and taking urgent action on climate change. It calls for sustainable economic growth, sustainable agriculture by GMOs, sustainable and modern energy, sustainable cities, sustainable industrialization. The word sustainable is the key word. If we dig deeper, it is clear it is a code word for a reorganization of world wealth via means such as the punitive carbon taxes that will dramatically reduce air and vehicle travel. The less developed world will not rise to the developed, rather the other way. The advanced civilizations must go down in their living standards to become, quote, sustainable. Maurice Strong. To understand the doublespeak of sustainable, we need to go back to Maurice Strong, a billionaire Canadian oil man and close friend of David Rockefeller, the man who played a central role back in the 1970s for the idea that man-made CO2 emissions were making the world unsustainable. Strong created the UN Environment Program and in 1988, the UN Intergovernmental Panel for Climate Change, IPCC, to exclusively study man-made CO2. In 1992, Strong stated, Isn't the only hope for the planet that the industrialized civilizations collapse? Isn't it our responsibility to bring that about? At the Rio Earth Summit, Strong said that same year, he added, quote, current lifestyles and consumption patterns of the affluent middle classes, involving high meat intake, use of fossil fuels, appliances, air conditioning, and suburban housing, are not sustainable. The decision to demonize CO2, one of the most essential compounds to sustain all life, human and plant, is not random. As Professor Lindzen at MIT, atmospheric physicist, put it, CO2 for different people has different attractions. After all, what is it? It's not a pollutant. It's a product of every living creature's breathing. It's the product of all plant respiration. It is the essential for plant life and photosynthesis. It's a product of all industrial burning. It's a product of driving. I mean, if you ever wanted a leverage point to control everything from exhalation to driving, this would be a dream. So it has a kind of fundamental attractiveness to the bureaucratic mentality. Lest we forget the curiously well-timed New York, quote, current health crisis exercise, or I can say it, pandemic exercise event 201, on October 18th, 2019, was co-sponsored by the World Economic Forum and the Gates Foundation. It was based on the idea that, quote, it is only a matter of time before one of these epidemics becomes global, a pandemic with potentially catastrophic consequences, a severe pandemic which becomes, quote, Event 201, unquote, which would require reliable cooperation among several industries, national governments, and key international institutions. The Event 201 scenario posited, quote, outbreak of a novel zoonotic coronavirus transmitted from bats to pigs to people that eventually becomes efficiently transmissible from person to person, leading to a severe pandemic. The pathogen and the disease it causes are modeled largely on SARS, but it is more transmissible in the community setting by people with mild symptoms, unquote. The declaration by the World Economic Forum to make a great reset is to all indications a thinly veiled attempt to advance the Agenda 2030, quote, sustainable dystopian model, a global Green New Deal in the wake of the current health crisis pandemic measures. Their close ties with the Gates Foundation projects and with the WHO and with the UN suggest we may soon face a far more sinister world after the current health crisis fades. And that essay by Wm Engdahl, published on June the 9th, read today, June the 13th, here on McDuff_2020, from the website of WmEngdahl.com, where you can get in touch with him and you can obtain his many very important books. That's it for this show. Thanks very much. See you soon.